The settlement's perimeter alarms hadn't worked in 3 cycles. Arwen Vale knew this, which was why she'd been awake when the razor wire fence finally gave way under the weight of something massive. She moved through the darkened corridors of the research outpost with practiced silence, plasma rifle charged and ready. The Zerathi weren't supposed to be this far into human territory, but the war had a way of redrawing maps when no one was looking. The greenhouse dome had been breached. Shattered glass crunched beneath her boots as she swept the room, breath misting in the sudden cold. The agricultural biosystems flickered and died, plunging the space into shadow broken only by emergency lighting that painted everything in shades of amber and rust. That's when she heard them. Not the deep, rumbling growl of an adult Zerathi warrior. Those sounds had haunted her dreams since the massacre at Kepler Station. No, these were smaller sounds. Whimpers, the frightened mewling of young creatures huddled in the wreckage of overturned planters and twisted metal. Arwen's finger eased off the trigger. She found them behind a collapsed shelving unit. 3 Zerathi cubs, no larger than earth wolves, their obsidian fur matted with blood and debris. Their 6 eyes, 3 on each side of their elongated skulls, reflected the emergency lights like scattered stars. They pressed against each other, trembling. The smallest one limped forward, dragging an injured hind leg. It stopped just beyond Arwen's reach, and made a sound she'd never heard from a Zerathi before. A questioning chirp, almost bird-like. Every tactical manual, every survival protocol, every screaming instinct told her to pull the trigger. Zerathi warriors grew fast. In 6 months, these cubs would be killing machines capable of tearing through reinforced steel. In a year, they'd be leading raids on human colonies. But in that moment, all Arwen saw were 3 terrified children who'd somehow gotten separated from their pack. She lowered the rifle. That had been 4 months ago. Now, Arwen stood in the same greenhouse, rebuilt, reinforced, and filled with the strange, bioluminescent plants the cubs seemed to prefer. Zara, Kix, and little Finn had integrated into her daily routine with surprising ease. They learned quickly, communicating through a mixture of gestures, chirps, and what Arwen had begun to recognize as rudimentary language. They followed her everywhere. When she worked on repairs, they'd bring her tools, often the wrong ones. But the effort made her smile. When she prepared meals, they'd sit in a perfect row, watching with rapt attention. At night, they curled up in a pile at the foot of her bed, their purring rumble a strange comfort against the isolation of the abandoned outpost. She'd tried to tell herself it was temporary, that she'd find a way to return them to their kind. But each passing day made that lie harder to maintain. The cubs had started calling her something, a sound that, when analyzed through the outpost's linguistic processors, translated roughly to "mother who protects." She'd stopped using the translator after that. The alpha came at dawn. Arwen was teaching Finn how to properly wrap his injured leg, now mostly healed, when every alarm in the outpost screamed to life simultaneously. The cubs' heads snapped up in unison, ears flattening against their skulls. Through the reinforced windows, she saw him. Korthal stood 3 meters tall, his midnight fur rippling with corded muscle beneath battle scars that told stories of 100 conflicts. His armor was minimal. Zerathi warriors disdained protection in favor of mobility, but the blade in his 4-fingered grip was a masterwork of their forgecraft, edge gleaming with molecular sharpness. He'd come alone. That told Arwen everything. This wasn't a military operation. This was personal. She grabbed her rifle and stepped outside, triggering the airlock before the cubs could follow. They threw themselves against the transparent barrier, claws scrabbling, voices raised in distress. Korthal's 6 eyes fixed on her with predatory focus. He raised the blade, muscles coiling for a charge that would cross the 50 meters between them in seconds. Then the cubs' cries changed. Not fear. Not warning. A word. A single, clear word, repeated with desperate urgency. Mother, mother, mother. The alpha froze mid-stride. His blade wavered. His gaze shifted from Arwen to the cubs pressed against the glass, then back to Arwen. In those 6 alien eyes, she saw something she'd never expected to see in a Zerathi warrior. Confusion, then understanding, then something that might have been grief. He lowered the blade slowly, reverently, and placed it on the ground. Then Korthal did something that sent shockwaves through every xenobiological assumption humanity had made about his species. He knelt, the universal gesture of submission, of peace, translated across 1,000 worlds and 1,000,000 years of evolution. Arwen's hands trembled on her rifle. You. The translator in his throat collar crackled to life, his voice like grinding stone. You kept them alive, fed them, protected them. They were children, Arwen said simply. They are Zerathi. We are your enemy. They were children, she repeated, with more force. Korthal's head bowed lower. The raid that separated us, it was chaos. I searched every human outpost within 10 sectors. I found only death. I thought. His voice broke. The translator struggling with the emotion. I thought my cubs died cursing my name for failing them. Arwen opened the airlock. The cubs exploded outward, a tangle of obsidian fur and joyous chirping. They swarmed over Korthal, who collapsed under their assault. His massive frame shaking with what she realized were sobs. Zara was the first to break away. She bounded back to Arwen and headbutted her leg with enough force to bruise. Then she looked between Arwen and Korthal, chirped once, and sat deliberately between them. Kix and Finn followed, forming a living bridge between human and Zerathi. Korthal rose slowly, cubs climbing over him like a living mountain. His eyes met Arwen's across the distance that suddenly seemed much smaller. You showed mercy to my children when you had every reason not to, he said. My blade, my honor, my life, they are yours, Arwen Vale. Should you ever have need. I don't want your life, Arwen replied. But maybe we could try not killing each other for a while. For their sake, she gestured to the cubs, who were now attempting to herd both adults toward the greenhouse. Korthal's mandibles spread in what she'd learned was a Zerathi smile. Perhaps humans are not what we were told. If one human can love Zerathi cubs as her own, then maybe we're not so different after all. Arwen finished. The war wouldn't end because of one alpha and one human. But as she watched the cubs play between them, chattering happily in a mixture of human words and Zerathi chirps, Arwen thought it might be a start. After all, the most powerful bonds weren't forged in battle. They were built in the quiet moments of choosing compassion over conflict, of seeing a child instead of an enemy, of calling someone mother, regardless of species.